and welcome to Excelsior Classes. You've come to join us at our monthly Content Expert webinar series, and it's November of 2018. We're so glad that you could be here. This series is offered to our member families only, and I hope that you will find that these presentations are as engaging, rigorous, and Christian-oriented as our regular classes. Tonight, we will be having a presentation by retired Lieutenant Colonel Gene Doremous, one of our Excelsior favorites here. Gene teaches both history and science courses, and he loves to teach. As a matter of fact, he's taught for years. Now, in his life outside of teaching, he and his wife, Mary, reside in upstate New York, and in their free time, they own and operate a small local newspaper. Well, tonight, Gene is joining us to discuss a book that fascinated him and which he mostly agrees with. He's going to discuss Gorman Gray's book, The Age of the Universe, and I hope that you'll sit back and listen to his explanation and see if you agree or have some questions. At the end of our session, we will open the floor for those who are live with us to ask any questions they would like. If you're watching this by recording, you can feel free to contact Excelsior Classes and ask for Lieutenant Colonel Gene Doremous with questions that you might have regarding this presentation. For now, I hope you'll sit back and enjoy yourself, and I hope we'll see you again at one of our monthly Content Expert series recordings. Thank you, and enjoy what Gene has to say.
Hey, welcome to this class. Hope you find it pretty exciting and interesting. And I'm looking forward to sharing this guy's book. I just noticed tonight when the book was published, and it was in 2000. So the book is now 18 years old, and I think I might have had it almost that long. I remember when it was advertised in World Magazine, and it kind of caught my attention out of World Magazine, and so I went and bought it and read it and have studied it and have actually preached. I do some substitute preaching quite a bit, and I even preached on it a couple times. So that kind of gives away a little bit that for the most part, I agree with what this guy has to say in the book. Obviously, with 15 or 20 minutes of time, pretty much all you're going to get is the main point of the book. It is a pretty deep read. It's not a super thick book, but it's got quite a bit of information in there. All right, so let's go to this slide. Before we get started, we have to kind of set a very important ground rule. We know that science and the Bible sometimes clashes, and we know that it's been clashing for well over 100 years now as far as this idea of evolution and what science says about evolution and what the Bible does not say about evolution. And we know that science has talked about starlight and the age of the universe, and there are many that have some issues and think that and believe that the Bible the Bible's depiction of the age of the universe does not match up with that of science. Or what some people have done when there's a clash is they have revised their biblical understanding and possibly hoping to not necessarily compromise, but to make the Bible true to science. Even though the Bible is not a science textbook, we believe that the Bible is scientifically accurate and correct. And when the two clash, as a general rule, you'd want to say the Bible is correct, at least the understanding that we have of the Bible. But here's my main point of this slide, and that is there's something we can't do. We cannot revise our understanding of the Bible to do away with a literal Adam and Eve and a literal fall. We can't do away with the fall. And here's why. And you might already know where I'm going with this. If you don't have the fall of mankind, then there is no need for a redeemer. If there's no need for a redeemer, then there's no need for a Jesus. And if there's no Jesus, then there's no Christianity. So the entire foundation of Christianity is based on the fall, a literal Adam and Eve and a fall. So rest assured, as we take a fresh new look at Scripture, at Genesis chapter 1, that what we are not going to do is negate the biblical teaching of Adam and Eve and the fall.
No, if you want to pay, no, you're good.
Somebody, yeah, Gosweilers, you have your mic on, which is another one of my students, or the mom. Okay, thank you. So that's the important point of this slide. So let's jump right into the material real quick. And this is, I'm going to start almost with the bottom line first, which is be kind of interesting. Gorman Gray believes that and teaches that Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 and Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 are things that happened before the 6 days. I repeat, verse 1 and verse 2 happened before the 6 days. That is so critical. And you know what? If you just were picked up the Bible for the very first time and started reading Genesis chapter 1 and you looked at it, you probably would just intuitively agree with Mr. Gray on that point. If just the reading makes it look like God is giving us a little bit of information, and then in verse 3, he kicks it off with day 1. So let's take a look at what happened, what we believe happened, or what Gorman Gray says, and I agree with him, happened prior to the 6 days. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And that's it. He created everything. The sun was created, all the stars, all the galaxies, the planets, the moon, and planet Earth. They were all created prior in verse 1, which we believe is prior to day 1. So his premise and his thesis throughout the whole book is that there is no time frame listed here in verse 1. It just says that he created it. And so if science wishes to say that we have starlight coming from stars that are 500 million light years away, he has no problem with that, because the Bible doesn't give us any time frame for when God created the heavens and the earth. But while we're on this verse, I want to show you something that some of you probably already have and do, if I can get to it. Oh, I'm having a little problem here. Let me pull it up again. I can't grab it. Oh, okay, grab that, pull that out of the way. Okay, here we go. So I just want to pull this in front of the screen real quick to show you. I don't know if you're familiar with this little Bible, this e-Bible program called eSword. Very, very good. And it gives you, among a lot of other things, it gives you the Strong's word definition. And it tells you what Hebrew word is being used. So for example, in Genesis chapter, in verse 1, he uses the word created, and the word created, according to Strong, the Hebrew word is down here at the bottom, ba-ra, B-A-W-R-A-W. And no surprise here, it means, it's the best definition of it is created. I want you just to kind of sort of try to remember ba-ra, because that is the Hebrew word that's used in verse 1. And then I want to, it's going to come in handy in just a few minutes, and that is the word for heavens, because we do know, you can see that it says in the beginning God created the heavens. The Hebrew word for heavens is right here, God be heaven. I just double click on it and it'll pop up, and I have no idea how to say it, Shah, Ma, whatever, Yim, Shah, Me. And we're getting Strong's definition for this Hebrew word, and it says here to be lofty, the sky. So just like in English, the Hebrew has numerous words that have multiple meanings, and that is so true with the word heaven. And Strong gives us a clue of that, because he said it's the sky, and then down here he says, perhaps alluding to the visible arch in which the clouds move. So our atmosphere can be the word heaven, the Hebrew word for heaven. But then it says, as well as to the higher ether, where celestial bodies revolve. So the word heaven can also mean the celestial heaven, the galaxies, the universe. So the word heaven can have at least two meanings: our atmosphere, where airplanes and birds fly, and the celestial astronomical heaven, the universe. So in this case, of course, you just use context and to say, well, what do you think? What definition of heaven is being used here? Obviously, the context is the universe. You could say in the beginning, God created the universe. And it includes, the universe includes the earth. And I just wrote down the Hebrew word for earth. And again, the Hebrew word for earth can have a few meanings. I guess we can go to it really quick just to show you. Here it is. I double click on it. E-H-R-E-T-S. And it can be firm, the earth, or it can mean land. So it can mean just dry land, which we sometimes use the word earth for just dry land as opposed to water. And sometimes we say the word earth, and what we're talking about is the planet Earth. So again, in verse 1, God created everything, the heavens and planet Earth and the sun and all the galaxies that you can take when you study my astronomy class. Everything. It was all created on day 1. I'm going to ask a question, but I'll ask it before we move on to the next slide. Let's talk real quick about verse 2. Don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's saying that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. The Bible is just telling us that at some point after God created the universe, that he was going to work on planet Earth and prepare planet Earth for life, for Adam and Eve, for us, to survive on this particular planet. And what he did is the word hover is actually a word that is brood, B-R-O-O-D, is what a chicken does when he sits on an egg. That it's just completely enveloped by God, by God's Spirit. A very dark envelope was over the planet Earth. And think of it almost like, you can almost think of it like putting the earth in an oven and just preparing, getting it ready, cooking it, letting it set, letting God work on the planet, getting it ready for man. So that's verses 1 and 2. Everything was created. Now the question you should be asking is, okay, Smarty Pants, Mr. Gray, if he created everything prior to day 1, then what's the 6 days all about? And here's where it's almost, in some ways, almost shocking news. There is very little use of the word create as we move past verse 1. And I'll show you that right now. Let's go to verse 3. And this is the 3 verses that make up day 1. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And then you can read verses 4 and 5, and you can notice that the word create does not exist in day 1. It just says let. And let is not the same Hebrew word as create. Let is, and we could pull this over again if you want to, ha-yah. And I'm going to come down here to verse 3 and double click on let there be. And you can see that it's let is ha-yah, not bara, which is create. So the writer of Genesis used a different word. And I think he used that word on purpose. It was not creation going on day 1. So the question might be, well, what did happen on day 1? What happened on day 1 is some light from our sun that was created prior to day 1 finally began to penetrate the surface of the planet. I'm going to repeat that. What happened on day one is God, and day one was only 24 hours. It was just one day, because it says right down here, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. So I'm a 24-hour day person. And in that first day, God peeled off an outer layer of the dark shroud that he had around planet Earth when he was hovering over it, and some light hit the planet, the surface of the planet. And that's all that happened in day one. Let's go to day two. Again, you can quickly look through the 3 verses, and you can see that the word create is nowhere on day two. You have the word let again, which is not create. And you also have the word made, and God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under it. So what is the Hebrew word for made? And let's come down here to verse, I get confused on what verse. We're in verse 7. And God made, I'm going to double click on it. And here is the Greek Hebrew word for made, a primitive root to do or make in the broadest sense and widest application, accomplish, advance, appoint, apt, be, at, become, bear, bestow, bring forth, bruise, be busy. And you can read through all that, and what you won't see in this Hebrew word is the word create. It's a different word. It means make. So it's almost like, well, I do it all the time for my grandson. You know, we have the bits and pieces, and then we put it all together and we make an airplane. So it's already there, all the bits and pieces are there, and I just do things to it, and I end up with a paper airplane. Likewise, God had already created everything, and now he's working on his creation. So you say, well, what happened in day two then? Well, God made the atmosphere. God made our atmosphere on day two. It says right here, it separated the waters that were under and the expanse of the waters that were above, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And here's why I taught you heaven in the last slide, was because there's two definitions of heaven. There's the local heaven, our atmosphere where birds and airplanes fly, and then there's the celestial heaven. Obviously, in the context of day two, we're talking about heaven, our atmosphere, our another correct word would be our biosphere. Okay, let's keep going. We want to move right along. Day three, again, we do not have the word create anywhere in day three. We have the word let a couple times, and we have the word earth show up again. And it says God called the dry land earth. Well, obviously, in the context of this verse, he's not talking about the planet Earth like he was in verse 1. He's talking about earth as in dry land. And then it says, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants, yielding seed, fruit, trees, bearing. And so obviously, day three is a 24-hour day that brought us vegetation on our planet. Let's keep going. Day four, again, we don't have the word create. Why? Because everything was created in day one, and that was happened before the 6 days. And he has the word let again. And this is always an interesting day because so many people, myself included, have been taught that God created the sun on day 4. The Bible, in my mind, and in Norman Gray's mind, does not say that he created the sun on day 4. And it was always confusing to me because I said, well, how come we have morning and night on day 1 and on day 2 and on day 3 when there was no sun? And it was always kind of hard for me to swallow the explanations that were given to me. When in fact, now I believe that the sun was created in verse 1 prior to the 6 days. And what happened on day 4 was that shroud that allowed some light to come in during the first day was cleared even more, so that it was, if you were to be actually standing on planet Earth, you could see the sun. You know, there's a difference between having light come through and actually looking up and seeing the sun or the stars or the moon. So it was on day 4 He didn't create the sun. He just let inhabitants on the earth see the sun and the stars and the moon. Made and let, not create. Okay, hopefully I've kind of shocked all of you a little bit. It shocked me when I first picked it up, and it was a good shock, though. It was a happy shock. Day 5, we still have the word let, heavens, and let, but the word create does show back up in day 5 when he's talking about the creatures. Day 5 is when he did the sea creatures and the air birds, sea and birds. And then the word create comes back in. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then in day 6 is when, of course, we get land creatures and man, Adam and Eve. And again, he says let, and he says, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds and their livestock. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let him have dominion over and he's got the word heavens again. He's got the word earth again. Earth being the dry land, heavens being the atmosphere. And then he finishes up day 6 by saying, so God created man in his own image. Here's where I have a little issue with Mr. Gray. He does not explain this issue. I don't know why. I need to write to him and say, what's up? You got the word create in day 5 and in day 6. But I did read other commentaries and did a little more research myself. And what I can tell you is he still created everything, but it's the way to think of the creation on day 5 and 6 is like Pinocchio. Geppetto might have taken up some wood and created a little boy, but it was just a wooden boy. And it needed something, Pinocchio obviously needed something extra special to have life. Similarly, we know that God created man out of the dust of the earth. I said that wrong. God made man. He had already created the dust of the earth, and he took the dust and he was able to make man out of the dust of the earth. But the creation part is when he breathed life into Adam. That's where the creative act happened, above and beyond the creative act of verse 1. A little bit confusing. You might want to watch this video a couple times to say, what is he saying? Or, of course, you can always Amazon it and buy the book. Well, you can buy the book, but he's not going to give you that explanation in the book. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. There are 2 other verses, now that we've got past the 6 days, and I'm going to come to a summary here really quick, that also talk about those creation / 6 days. One talks about creation, the other one talks about the 6 days. And many of you are familiar with the book of Job. And in Job chapter 38 in verse 4, God is speaking. He says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have an understanding. And then a very famous verse is in verse 9. It says, when I made clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band. So Job actually written, the book of Job was written prior to the book of Genesis was written. The book of Job is the oldest book in our Bible. And he's saying that when he created the earth, and where were we when I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, which coincides with verse 2 that says that the Spirit of God hovered over the earth. So there's this sense that the earth was cooking. The earth was being prepared for man, and in it, it had a very dark covering over it, a shroud over it. And in day 1, some light penetrated the shroud, or the shroud was peeled back. And on day 4, a bigger part of the shroud was peeled back, so all that was left was our atmosphere, and then the sun could come through all the way to planet Earth on day 4. Now, everybody uses Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, when God is explaining the 5th commandment about honoring the Sabbath. And it says, for in 6 days the Lord, and everybody just wants to say made and create and it's not create. It doesn't say create. The writer did not use the Hebrew word create. It used the Hebrew word for made, which is to work, to do, to make, and to be. And it says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven. Well, in this context, heaven is our atmosphere. And earth. Well, in this context, earth is the dry land. The sea. In this context, the sea is the oceans and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. So those who want to always use Exodus 20, verse 11 to say, God created the universe in 6 days. It doesn't say that. He created the universe in verse 1. And the 6 days he worked and he let and he made. And then it's all summarized right here. In 6 days he made our atmosphere and our dry land and our oceans and all that is in them. So this cover of this book helps us understand a little bit of a summary that the earth was shrouded, and the shroud was peeled back during those 6 days, 6 24-hour days. How are we doing time-wise? I'm showing 7:28. So
Yeah, Gina, I think that maybe what we can do is open the floor for about 5 to 10 minutes if anybody has any questions. And then at that point, if you don't mind making me the host, and I'll conclude things and we'll end our recording. But I will say that if anybody has any very interesting questions and you want to stay after the recording concludes, you are certainly welcome to stay for a few minutes. I believe that Jean has offered to stay just for a short time. So if you would like to do that, please feel free. But why don't we open the floor up for any questions that people have regarding this discussion, because this has been engaging, rigorous, and Christian. So here we go. Let's see what you guys have to say.
Anybody? Tucker, thank you. I've never thought about creation that way. Tucker, and feel free to do what I've done and to what Gorman Gray. By the way, eSword is free. I mean, they ask for a donation, but you can download eSword right onto your computer and have some marvelous resources there right at your fingertips. And this is one of the handy. Of course, I don't necessarily go to Strong's Dictionary a lot. I go to the commentaries because they have like a dozen commentaries in eSword. Oh, the Blue Letter Bible app. Yep, I know a lot of people do and it's on their cell phone. Yep, and I do not do that. Anybody? Hi, and Christy, is this my good neighbor, my neighbor Christy, my New Jersey neighbor Christy? I'm not sure if. Okay, Christy says, how do you reconcile the sun existing prior to day one with the phrase, made the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night? Yes, because, and I'm glad you used that. You yourself in your chat used the word made, not create. And so the word made, let's go to that word made on day 4. Where does day 4 start? Called the dry land earth. Let me see, 11. I don't have it memorized. What day was 4? 4 starts on 16. Okay, there we go. So let's get over to 16 real quick. And it says, and God made 2 great lights, exactly like you said. Let me double click on it. It's not, he did not create 2 great lights. He did that in verse 1. And you can just look down, advance, appoint, become, bear, bestow, bring forth is probably a good definition that we might want to use. He brought forth from our vantage point on planet Earth on day 4. You can now what brought the light from the moon and the light from the sun is brought forth. It's now hitting you. You can look up and see it, and you can feel its ray. You can feel the sun's rays. That's how I reconcile it. It's not the word create. It's just the word, not just, but it's the word made. Thank you for asking that. The sun and the moon were up there. The sun and the moon could have been up there for billions of years, but because there's a shroud over planet Earth, an inhabitant on planet Earth would have never seen. Just like to this day, the sun has never hit the surface of Venus. Venus has this thick, dark carbon dioxide fence around it, and the sun has yet to hit the surface of Venus. So kind of like that. Thicker than the ocean. Probably, and I'm not sure what it could have been made of. You know, it's like a chicken sitting on the egg, and you just can't see the egg. Oh, Christy, John and I are stuck on the road in a snowstorm. The road is closed. Very interesting. Yes, a storm hit upstate New York, all across New York, New Jersey tonight at 7 o'clock. So you're 33 minutes into the storm, or you're a little further south than me. So temperature is 98 ATM. Cloud meaning, okay, I think cloud. Yeah, a very thick cloud that God walked away. Any other questions? Pretty interesting. The book is good. There's a fair amount of repetition in the book, and I loaned it to a person in my Sunday school class some years ago, and she went home and read it and came back and said he keeps repeating himself. It's a great book, but he repeats himself. I think he really wants to make his point in about 10 different ways, and so you'll get that if you notice if you should buy the book. Move this out of the way. Oh, sorry. I meant to do that, meeting moderator.
Thank you, Jean. Did anybody have any more questions before we conclude our recording? This has been a great, interesting book, and I have my mind swimming with all kinds of thoughts. So I really, really appreciated Jean's presentation. Let me wrap us up then, maybe, if you don't have any other concluding thoughts. I did want to just pop this up for anybody who's watching our recording. We had a glitch at the beginning and weren't able to bring this up for you. But this has been a really fascinating discussion in our Content Expert series, presented by our teacher, Jean Doremous. And we are looking forward to more monthly meetups with other content experts. Next month, we'll be looking at some topics that relate to the challenges that high school art students face and how to prepare them for college in a way that is successful and directed. We want to invite anybody who has not had the pleasure of having Jean as their teacher to check him out on our class pages, or on our website rather. Jean teaches both history and science, so you can look him up there, see more about him if you're so inclined. And I guess we'll wrap things up for tonight, but I look forward to having everybody join us again next month. Again, if you have any final questions, you can go ahead and pop those on the screen for Jean, but we're going to wrap up our recording. So thank you all for joining us. Jean, I'll let you go ahead and hit the recording button for us.
Oh, no, you got the host now, so you got to do that, right?
Let's try. Let's see.
But I want to tell Christy real quick, while Julie was talking, I sent up a prayer dart for you and your travels in that snowstorm. It's supposed to be pretty strong tonight, so I did that.
Awesome. Thank you guys all for being here, and I guess we'll go ahead and we'll sign off then. We wish you all a good evening and good Thanksgiving coming up next week.
Good night, everybody.
We'll
Thanks
see
for
you in a
coming.
month.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.